Hello, welcome to a special Knicks Championship edition of Buddha Talks Hoops. Nate here, and the Knicks have done it. The Knicks are champions, and I was able to get the Knicks championship shirt. Now, I will say I'm a little disappointed because it's not the authentic one that they were wearing on the court, the bedazzled edition that was a little strange at first, but kind of sold myself on to purchase, but those sold out and they just sold these replica ones, which are okay. I'm not gonna complain. I was talking to the person at the store and they said those might not be back in stock till December. So I'm like, I don't know, whatever. I don't care enough to wait that long. Cop this one, pretty nice, and just needed something to commemorate this Knicks championship team. The Knicks won the title. Just want to go through the team, go through the season, get some thoughts out on what I've watched all season from October up until now. Crazy to think they actually did it. Before the season, I knew they had a really good team. They've been making runs the last few years, dating back to when Brunson first joined the organization. Second round exit, conference finals last year. And this year, we all knew the East was open. Before the season, thought they were going to make the finals. I didn't think it was a likelihood, but I thought they had the best team in the East. I also thought the best team in the league was probably going to come out of the West, and here we are. And we'll go into the series in depth from a Spurs angle too at some point in the future, but today I really just want to focus on the Knicks. And a lot happened in this series, but I can confidently say the Knicks were the best team in the NBA this year. And that's crazy to think. And I just want to talk through some of the developments of kind of how we got here. And really, there's five main subjects that I'd like to go through. And the first one, I think the most important one, is Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson being the guy that really made this all possible from an initial standpoint of when he joined the team back in free agency in 2022. And obviously this title was not all because of Jalen Brunson. This was a great team effort. So many contributors from the bench to guys in the starting lineup to some of the coaching stuff. So I'm not trying to frame this as this is solely because of Jalen Brunson. That's absolutely not true. But Jalen Brunson is the engine of this team, and the fact that he has gotten to this level as a player is, I think that's something that deserves pods in its own right. And it's really one of the more surprising ascendances of a star. And listen, we've seen stuff like this before. I mean, even Nikola Jokic was a second-round pick. Like, nobody thought when he was coming to the league he was going to become a multiple-time MVP, Finals MVP, all that. But in terms of the pace at which Brunson turned into the player that he is, starting in Dallas, and then having that surge in that 2022 playoffs, beginning in the Utah series when Luka was out and he's going out there putting 40-point bombs on a Jazz team that was good. I mean, that was, I believe, a 4-5 matchup that season, if I remember correctly. Yes, it was. So we saw it at the highest level. And then free agency comes, he comes to New York, and everybody's like, okay, this should be a good player. This should be maybe a fringe all-star guy. But here he is, an offensively dominant player. I could generally say that. And I do think it can inform us to the potential of guys, because we knew that Jalen Brunson had some limitations in terms of his height and whatever else there was. Really, there's not anything else. It's really just the height. But the height was a thing. You know, he's listed as 6'2". That's probably a little generous. Probably more like a 6'1" guy. But the kind of player that he is special. And we haven't seen it too much. And I've actually made this comparison in the last couple seasons, and I think Jalen Brunson has now surpassed the player I'm about to mention. But I saw some similarities these last few seasons to Kyrie Irving. And I think that Jalen Brunson has done a much better job of positioning himself career-wise to be on a team that can support him. And I do think that there's certain elements of his game that are stronger than Kyrie's. I think he's got a more consistent power game, whatever. Health also a big thing, obviously. Jalen's been able to stay on the court, and that's been huge for him. But it's really great to see a player like Brunson just make the most of his skill sets. And it's really a testament to just what basketball skill work can do for you as an individual. Now, I think another part of his game is the quickness and the ball handling quickness and his ability to change speeds and go from super fast to super slow and then rise up and shoot. And because of that, I think he's able to play multiple paces, which is one of the most important things I think for any player. And I think the best players are guys that are able to play multiple paces. You can play fast, you can play in the half court, you can play in semi-transition. And Brunson, he incorporates everything. Offensively, he incorporates everything. He's able to pull up off the dribble for threes. He has that mid-range game both from a pull-up standpoint and from a floater. The finishing, he's capable. I mean, we saw in that game 5, that finish he had on Wemby, where he gets Wemby on his backside and finishes, I believe, even with the right. Like, it's just really impressive to watch. And if you're a fan of the game, you have to just enjoy watching him. Enjoy watching him as a talent. He can play off the ball, too, because he's really a tremendous spot-up shooter, just a great three-point shooter in general. He has elevated to a point where he's one of the best players in the NBA. He's going to go down in history as an all-time great at this point. I can't wait to see the rest of what he's able to give the Knicks because he's just such a tremendous player. And none of this would have been possible without him. And the fact that the Knicks were able to get him for $100 million, and he was I think we might look back at that signing as the last, at least as long as these cap rules exist still, the last truly transformative free agent signing. We were used to it for a while with the LeBron free agency sagas, Durant, every time Melo would hit free agency, there was, even going back to Kobe, there was, that's, the Lakers were always tying him up so he wouldn't get to free agency because that was always a thing. And now it's not really because of the cap stuff and the players. Just there's so much incentive to just stay with your team in the worst case scenario, demand a trade. So we haven't really seen that since Brunson. I don't know if we will for the foreseeable future. So, and to get Brunson at that time, because those other guys that I mentioned, they entered the market as these guys that are going to demand top market dollar to become one of the highest paid players in the league. And to get Brunson before he turned into what this is really just catching lightning in a bottle. And we saw Brunson develop as a player. As I said, there was shades of it that last season in Dallas. And I remember when he signed with New York and there was a lot of mixed chatter about it. And it was exciting because anytime you get a free agent, a new player on your team that you have big hopes for, you're going to be excited. So a lot of Knicks fans were excited, but we didn't know exactly what Jalen Brunson was. Okay, this was not LeBron James. And listen, Jalen Brunson's not LeBron James, but this was not even. I mean, even when we used to go about Paul George's, whatever talks of him changing teams, and I mean, what just happened with him with the Sixers, it was not. He's coming in, we're giving him the most money possible, and we're expecting him to be a superstar, okay? So to get him at that point, and then, yes, as he entered free agency, I remember when he made the sign to the Knicks, a lot of players were coming out and saying, I remember just seeing the tweets and whatnot, guys saying, like, oh, no, this guy is the real deal. And I think you know that because if you have to guard him, you are just being tortured. And watching him play, he is so hard to guard. And if you were a defensive guy, especially probably in that last season of Dallas, as he physically matured. I mean, you look at Jalen Brunson when he was a rookie, and he has always had this skill level to a point. Obviously, he's developed it. He's improved. He's gotten better as a player since he played Villanova. That's obvious. But even physically, he's matured a little bit, I think, kind of growing into his body, both strength-wise, speed-wise, all of that. But as he ascended, and especially that last year in Dallas, I think he was starting to turn into the player that he was going to be. And if you're on the floor with him, you know how hard it is to guard him. And it just must suck. So the players knew. And we've seen it now in New York. The dude is an absolute menace with the basketball in his hands. So it's great to watch. So happy he's a Knick. We're definitely going to look back at this and think, wow, did we really get kind of lucky because of how Dallas fumbled it and it all played out. But then, yeah, just kind of like, oh, Knicks finally figured one out. They figured one out, and to see him the rest of his career is going to be really exciting. I'll go say it right now. I think Jalen Brunson is a top 5 player in the league, and I'm hoping to do a top 30 pod this offseason. I do enjoy doing those after every season. Hopefully get some guests on that. That would be a hard one to just rip on myself. But if anybody wants to hop on for the top 30 pod, please even just write in the comments, because I want to see how I really stack him up against other guys in the league, because it really can't be understated how impactful an offensive player he is, how adaptable he is as an offensive player. Being able to play, as I said, different paces, different size defenders, different coverages. He has become just something that defenses are struggling to figure out. And I think you saw that in Game 5, which was just an all-time performance. 45 points in Game 5. That will go down as really, I think, one of the greatest single-game finals performances in recent history. I mean, I say one of because it's vague, it's broad, right? And, you know, it's Game 5, but it's a closeout game. So I think it's up there. It was a tremendous postseason from him, just a tremendous season overall. It's just been the number one thing, I think, when you talk about this Knicks team. In my opinion, I think the conversation is to start with Jalen Brunson. So we'll leave the conversation regarding Jalen Brunson there for now, and we'll go into the second thing, which I believe is there's things I'm going to talk about later that might be more impactful, but I think this is one of the more noteworthy, and it's the coaching. It's the coaching change of going from Tom Thibodeau to Mike Brown, and a lot of people looked at the Mike Brown hiring as a last resort. I mean, we forget this now because, of course, I don't think we forget it. We're just not focusing on it, which rightfully so. We shouldn't be talking too much about the coaching chronicle of a summer ago when the Knicks just won their first title in 53 years. But if we want to just hop in the time machine just a little bit and go 12 months back, the Knicks coaching search was an absolute mess. The bombshell of Tibbs being fired was making waves. I think people thought there was a chance, but just the way it all went down. And then the Knicks are requesting to interview people across the league, and there's tweets going around that they're getting rejected by Eric Spoelstra, by Jason Kidd. It was weird. I didn't pay too much attention to it, but when the Mike Brown hiring happened, I raised an eyebrow. I did, because I think Mike Brown's done a lot of great stuff in the league. He coached LeBron James, coached Stephen Curry. He was around for Kevin Durant. You know, obviously not head coach of Stephen Curry and Kevin Durant, and then he turns around the Kings to an extent, and I think he's got a pretty innovative offensive mind. I looked at it and said, okay, I think he should be able to help us a little bit, just change of pace. I never thought the issue with the Knicks' past failures have been with the coaching. I had some complaints with what Tibbs did, but I never thought, okay, this is a title team if we just make a coaching switch. And I've heard people talk about, like, do the Knicks win this title with Tibbs? The answer is we're never going to know, okay? So I think it would be a little arrogance to be convinced one way or another. Now, do I believe they would have won this title with Tibbs? I don't, but I'm going to admit that maybe he could have, okay? I think Mike Brown did some stuff, but I think at the end of the day, you know, this is a players' league. But I think the biggest thing with what Mike Brown did this year was just develop the whole team and just look at the whole team as an experimentation. And not even a season-wide experimentation, but a game-to-game. And that's something that we know. If you've watched the Knicks since Tibbs hopped on board, he was not interested in that. He looked at every single game, game 1 that took place in October, all the way to game 90-something in the conference finals last year. And Tibbs took them to the conference finals, which was a huge accomplishment. But we know that He didn't experiment much with the roster. He didn't look at the roster as a blank slate. He more so kind of put guys into roles. And I do think that some of that is bad. You should be more open-minded with your roster. I think on an X's and O's schematic thing, I thought Tibbs was fine. And honestly, I think that some of the stuff Mike Brown tried even earlier in the year didn't really work. And by the end, listen, there's some points of the game where it looks like the Tibbs offense all over again. Jalen Brunson scored 45 of their 94 points, okay? I mean, Tibbs would have loved that. If Tibbs was coaching that game 5, Brunson probably would have played 48 minutes. He loves nothing more than to put the ball in the hands of your best player. And guess what? At the highest level, sometimes that's just the offense. If you have a player like Jalen Brunson, like what Wembanyama was supposed to be, we'll talk about maybe in the future what went wrong with Wembanyama offensively in this series at times. But if you have a Jalen Brunson, you can run all the stuff in you want. You're playing a great defensive team in the Spurs, and the best offense might just be give Jalen Brunson the ball. And Tibbs would have done that. Now, what Tibbs probably wouldn't have done is put Jose Alvarado in the game at the end of Game 4 when they really do good. They really do good offensively and defensively, I thought, because Brown saw that game, and he saw the lack of ball handling that was at the court in that particular matchup. The Knicks were having trouble getting into sets, and then in the half court, we needed a little bit more of an outlet, of a playmaker, of a guy that can probe the defense, spit it out, and then still make shots if it comes to him. And that was a Jose Alvarado game. I don't know if the Knicks win that game if Jose Alvarado doesn't get the opportunity that he got. And the likelihood that Tibbs would do that is low. Just because we've seen in the past, he is going to go into the game pretty much knowing what he's going to do at certain points in the game in terms of who he's going to play, what kind of stuff they're going to run, and that could be detrimental. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Tibbs would have put in Alvarado. I can't say I know for sure. I don't think he would have, though. So I think, just in terms of the coaching thing, Mike Brown went into this season, and he tried a lot of different stuff. Some of it worked, some of it didn't, but at the end, he stayed open-minded, and I think that was the biggest thing for him. So I'm happy for him. Seems like a cool guy, seems like a fun guy. Really enjoy the who let the dogs out chance. I think that's just, sometimes when you get these post-championship stuff, it's hit or miss, like the quotes you get, because sometimes guys might be trying to do a little bit too much. This happened in the finals presser, where he's doing the who let the dogs out, and to carry it through to the title, I'm down for it. So happy for Mike Brown. Good coaching job overall this season. So maybe in the future we'll get more into what the Knicks coaching stuff was at an X and O standpoint if we do more of a deep dive in like the finals and all that. But in terms of a holistic thing, Mike Brown did his job. He's now an NBA champion coach. Good for him. Good for him. The next thing is the team building. Leon Rose, the GM, president, whatever you want to call him, the guy who really was the architect of this team. And every season I look back at the champion and I think, okay, how does this championship roster inform us about what teams could win the title? Because there were things on this team that for a while people looked at it from a black and white standpoint. And listen, I had my doubts at times too, okay? This team has been a roller coaster at times over the last few years, but we saw what the peak was, and we saw it over the last 2 months of just how dominant this team was, and when everybody was playing the best within their role, how effective they could be. But there was questions from, as I said, a black and white standpoint, where people said, this can't work, this can't be a title-winning team. Karl-Anthony Towns is not strong enough defensively to be the starting 5 on a title-winning team. Jalen Brunson is not great enough to be the best player on a title-winning team. You need more ball handling, maybe. Mikal Bridges is not good enough to warrant whatever you might have given up on the back end, to not have the depth, to not have the ball handling, whatever. Okay, so there was things people were picking at, but at the end of the day, they did it, and all of those things worked out. And I think that the biggest takeaway is trusting cohesion, trusting guys that play well together, building around your best player, protecting your best player offensively and defensively, and building out also depth pieces that you think can complement what your starting five might be lacking. Because at the end of the day, they had the primary ball handler that was good enough. Karl Anthony Towns, although he's not an isolation ball handler, the guy as other number twos are, he's enough of a threat and an impact offensively to be a legitimate number two. And then, sure, if he's going to have the issues defensively, you try your best to plug it up with other guys, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart. Try to get wings wherever you can to try to plug up the defensive deficiencies that you have at the 1 and 5, and then also be able to bring guys off the bench that give you some defense. Landry Shamet proving to be an effective defender. Obviously, Mitchell Robinson is like this super sub at times. So the biggest thing is having different ways to play, having different guys that can fill in roles based on what you need in a given matchup, and then ultimately having those guys be as good as possible, having the best players possible, and getting a guy, Jalen Brunson, that proves to be a top 5 player. Top 7, 8 player, okay? Karl Anthony Towns, people have had their questions about it. And listen, Karl Anthony Towns has his ups and downs too. He scores 2 points in Game 5 and they still win. But overall, he was a very impactful player this whole postseason because of his diverse skill set, being a stretch 5. Defensively showing that in certain matchups, he can actually be an asset. And I think we actually even saw this back in 2024, I believe it was, when Minnesota beat Denver, and Towns had a really good defensive series. He's kind of a matchup-dependent player. There's sometimes he can look really bad, but that's the case for a lot of guys. And then the Knicks did a good job of saying, okay, in those games where maybe Towns is struggling defensively, let's do our best to plug it up on the wings so that we can assist him. Getting OG Anunoby, that's probably the second biggest move after this Jalen Brunson thing. The trade for Anunoby and giving up Barrett, giving up Quickly, who were fan favorites, getting OG. I definitely was a fan of the trade because I looked at that and said, at that time, the Knicks are getting the best player in the trade. We didn't really know what Quickly was going to develop into, and right now Toronto is struggling a little bit on that front. We can get into that maybe when we do a full league-wide team breakdown. I do want to do that this offseason as well. I want to do report cards for every team from this season. So if you want to get on that pod, comment as well. But yeah, in general, Leon Rose just did a great job finding guys where he thought the Knicks had the most trouble. The Bridges one is the one that kind of, you're still like, wow, that was crazy. We gave him so many picks. And Bridges, he's not a star, okay? And even I went into the Bridges trade. I actually thought that he might be an all-star with the Knicks. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case, but he's a great role player. He's a great guy to have if you have other offensive options and if you have an elite guy that you can just give the ball to and that's a good enough offense. To have Bridges on the side as just a really competent defender. I think sometimes he gets overblown as a shutdown guy, but he's never a guy you're going at. He's never a guy that the defense is saying, let's pick on him. And offensively, he's able to fill some roles. He's able to be a really good shooter in the corner. Corner shooting is just so valuable. To just stick a guy in the corner that can make threes, I mean, that opens up the game for Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns so much. To give you a little bit of pull-up scoring as well when he's able to get in his mid-range bag. And when we look at the Knicks season in general, everybody made contributions because, as I said, although Jalen Brunson is the dude on this team, he's not the only guy. And basketball's a team game. That's what I love about it so much is I always say when you win, everybody played well. And everybody did enough. And Mikal Bridges scoring 20 points in Game 2, huge. Even in Game 5, he hit some shots, and they need all those shots. He scored, I believe, 13 points, makes a free throw at the end. I know it's just 1 or 2, but we'll take one even in that standpoint, from that standpoint. So he did his thing. And I'm happy that he got his moment and kind of, F them picks. Like that's really the truth right now. You could tell it meant a lot for him. I mean, he had legitimate, just instant tears coming down his face after the title. I think Mikal Bridges has probably been getting a lot of flack just from the fan base and media and whatnot. That was kind of the thing that the Knicks were getting, like, oh, we did that for him. But at the end of the day, it was all worth it. It was all worth it because this team just made sense. This team all made sense together. The players were all good enough to warrant the roles they were in. Josh Hart, that was a great trade going back to a few years, kind of just giving up pennies for him, who's just a complete winning player. So this team no ego, no selfishness, a buy-in, and high-end talent. And that's Leon Rose right there. And this team, we'll see if they could influence how other teams look at team building, for sure. So just from a schematic standpoint, last two things I wanted to touch on real quick. The offense of the Knicks and the defense of the Knicks. Why did both of them work so well? And, I talked about this a little bit already. Offensively, it obviously starts with Jalen Brunson having that 1A initiator. Karl Towns being that second option that even when he is not directly scoring, assisting, whatever, doing stuff with the ball in his hands, his impact on the game is so massive because of his ability to space the floor and just be somebody the defense is always worrying about. Also a great rebounder. Not as much offensively, but he can as well. But this Knicks team offensively, they were able to play multiple paces, as I said earlier. And I think that starts with the personnel. Having ball handlers, having guys that can go up and down the floor, and having enough shooting as well. This team just had a little bit of everything. It starts with Jalen Brunson. They were able to do some off-ball stuff in the finals and in this playoffs as a whole that I thought was pretty cool as well, utilizing OG Anunoby as a screener. Their go-to action was kind of that corner screen where Brunson's coming off, but then OG can also slip easy for a dive in. So they had a lot of stuff to go to, but at the end of the day, they were able to go to a guy that could get you a bucket, that could get you a look. And this offense, it has the ability, it always has had the ability to be top end. And their offense wasn't even that great from just a numbers standpoint this series. I believe I heard that their offensive rating was like 110, which is nothing too spectacular. But they were, first of all, they're playing one of the best defenses in the league, one of the best defensive players. I mean, you could maybe all time, Victor Wembanyama, and it was such a challenge going against him. And what the Knicks were able to muster was really impressive. It was really impressive that, especially when it got down in the half court, they're still able to produce. Having guys that can play off of catches, closeouts, OG Anunoby having 33 points in Game 4. The offense proved good enough, and I'm looking forward to talking more about this Knicks team in the report card, and then also just kind of going into the next few seasons, because I'm excited to see when you win a chip, I feel like you have that emboldened sense that you can do it, that what you do works. There isn't any questioning about what guys are doing on the floor, what their roles are. So I'm excited to see how that develops next few seasons as well. And then defensively, which was for much of this roster's time together, was one of the bigger questions, because their two best players have been known to be defensive liabilities in Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. And I think Towns proved that in matchups, he can actually be a plus guy. Now, with Brunson, he's never going to be a plus guy because of his size, but he's also just a good team guy. He's a good team defender in terms of being in the right place. Takes a ton of charges. That's amazing. And that's just a testament of being in the right place, of knowing where the offense is going, reading the offensive movement, and getting yourself in the right place. And listen, if he's still going to get taken in isolation, bigger guys are going to try to take him to the rim, even guards, because they feel more comfortable shooting over him. That's always going to be the case. But if you're playing from a team concept and you're able to do all of this stuff that you can control, it's going to lead to a better baseline. But defensively, this team was able to, just like on offense, play cohesively. It felt like they were always on a string. It didn't feel like there was too many times where guys were getting open transition threes, or there's guys pointing at each other not knowing who they're guarding. OG Anunoby is the anchor of this whole thing. He's one of the best defensive players in the league. It's crazy he didn't get a first team. I don't even remember the all-defense teams. I don't typically look at them, honestly. But from what I watch throughout the whole season, OG Anunoby is the best wing defender in the league. I don't see why not. And as I said, they have other rotational defensive players like Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges, that guys you can't pick on, guys that are making plays. And then Mitchell Robinson coming off the bench is a super sub, gives you a different look with the bigs. So defensively, good enough. I do think it's interesting just matchups, though, because kind of like in boxing, they say styles make fights. We've seen the Knicks struggle with a certain kind of team. I even go back to the conference finals. They struggled a lot with Indiana. Indiana moves the ball super quick, and their ball handler, Tyrese Halliburton, is one of the quickest decision makers in the league. So hard to guard because he's quick with the ball as well. And the Knicks really struggled with that. This year, they did play other jitterbug guards like that, Tyrese Maxey, Donovan Mitchell, but none of those guys and neither of those teams play the offense that Indiana did. The Eastern Conference, now I'm kind of going on a tangent, but the Eastern Conference run was just crazy. Now, I think multiple things can be true. I don't think the East was very strong this year, but the Spurs were strong as hell. So you can't really even say that anymore. And that finals was just so incredible to win in 5 and to win in the ways that they did. It seems like the Eastern playoff run people aren't even talking about. But they dominated it. It's funny that their most the series that went the longest was the Atlanta series. Obviously, the Spurs series was the most difficult, was the most taxing, obviously. But the Hawks series being the only one that went to 6 is pretty funny. But we saw how they closed out that series. We saw how they took care of Philly. We saw how they just ripped Cleveland's soul from their bodies. So, an incredible Eastern Conference run. Defensively, they swallowed those teams up. And just on both ends, a lot of different keys, a lot of different ways to kind of do the puzzle. And even guys like Deuce McBride, who didn't have a great offensive playoff and finals, not really a factor offensively, but his defense goes underrated. And there's so many plays where they're able to cut guys off, make an extra pass, swallow up that initial action, and there's guys on the backside rotating in. Just a very in sync unit. Both sides, top to bottom, coaching players. It was a great team. It was a great series. Can't believe they actually did it. Happy they did. Looking forward to talking more hoops as the offseason rolls on. There's a lot going on, but right now it's the time to just bask in the Knicks' glory. Thanks for tuning in. Buddha Talks Hoops.